Hello lovely people, I'm Catherine and welcome to this Friday's Slowstitch video. I thought of doing this as a little mystery project, if you like the sound of that. It won't be a great long thing, it will maybe only be in 2 parts, but with my group next year we've got a couple of exhibitions and we've been requested, sorry there's a fly in here, we've been requested to make 2 square pieces measuring 20 centimetres, but sorry, make a dismissive thing when I'm made to work in centimetres, but that's 8 inches. So I need to make 2 8-inch squares, and everybody in the group's going to make 2 and we're going to display them all together. So I've got an idea of what I want to do and I thought maybe some of you would like to do it as well. So I'm being very secretive about it, not in a, you know, not in a nasty way, just I thought it might be fun. So I'm going to start this week with explaining what I'm going to do initially, and then you've got the choice. You can either go with the mystery aspect of it and, you know, just take a leap of faith, as they say, and stitch along with me, or you can wait for part 2 to come up and see what's happening with it and, you know, then decide if you want to do it or not. So my squares, like I said, will be, they have to be mounted on some stretchers or something, and they'll be wall art. But when you have 2 squares, and yours can be any size, you don't have to make them 20 centimetres or 8 inches, you could do 6 inches. I wouldn't go too small and fiddly, maybe 6 inches or 5 inches minimum. You could make 2 pairs and then you'll end up with 4. And then everybody who's been watching for some time probably knows what I'm going to say next, so 1, 2, 3 all together now, rice bag! Or you could just, you know, see when you make them what you want to do with them. We don't always have to have an end goal in mind, do we, when we're slow stitching. So there's that. So that's going to be the main part of this week's episode. The other thing I want to mention is yesterday I went to, no actually the day before yesterday, Wednesday, I went down to Bridport to deliver my dad's memory quilt, which I call the Crumbs of Comfort, which I made a few years ago after he passed away with his shirts and handkerchiefs, for an exhibition that's going in St Mary's Church in Bridport on South Street. It's a beautiful old church, which is called a Festival of Quilts and Flowers. So there'll be various quilts on display and alongside there'll be flower arrangements that go with the quilts, and it's all about the storytelling aspect of the quilts and quilts as how they accompany us through our lives, you know, from when we're little babies through to the end. So I'll be going to, that exhibition is actually open today, Friday, the 20 whatever we are, the last weekend of June. Is it the 26th, I think? And it runs until Sunday. Now Sunday it's only open as an exhibition in the afternoon because obviously it's a church and there'll be a service in the morning. So I'm going to go along on Sunday afternoon. I'll probably get there at about 2, it closes at 4. So if anyone is going and, you know, particularly wants to see me, I should be there around then. I'm also reliably informed by Becca, Becca runs Becca's Fabric Larder in Bridport, and I've known her for quite a few years now, and she is you know, putting the exhibition together, and she'll be there with me on Sunday as well. But I will also, for Monday's video, for those of you who can't get to Bridport, and I know that's many of you, Bridport is in Dorset on the southwest coast of England, I've asked in advance and I've been told that yes, it's absolutely fine for me to do a video for you. So Monday's video, where we normally do the journaling, I will give you a little update on, because we're still busy with our moon journal project. I'll show you, you know, my progress on that. But the main body of that video, excuse me, frog in my throat, will be an exhibition tour of that exhibition in the church, and at the same time I'll show you a little bit of footage of Becca's shop, which I don't think is open on the Sunday, but if you go on the Saturday it will be open. And also Saturday in Bridport is market day and it's a wonderful market, so it does mean Bridport is busier obviously, but you could make a day of it and see the market as well. Because Becca's shop, although it's a fabric shop, and she also teaches classes there as well, and she does have new fabric, but she also has a very comprehensive range of pre-loved, pre-used fabric. She has I think she calls it heritage, I can't exactly remember. but she has repurposed clothing that she's processed, furnishing samples, you know, pre-loved fabric that's never been made into anything that she's acquired through house clearances and things like that. And I just loved that aspect of it, so I wanted to share that with you as well. So yeah, so Monday's video will be the exhibition in St Mary's Church, the Festival of Quilts and Flowers, and a little glimpse of Becca's lovely shop. And yeah, I'll just update you on where I am with my moon stitching. So that, just to recap in case it's got lost in the witter, this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in St Mary's Church, South Street, Bridport, a Festival of Quilts and Flowers. Only Sunday afternoon though, not the morning, and tea and cake available. So without further ado, let me go on to my desk and I'll share with you the beginning of this little mystery project. Okay. Sorry, I'm just winding this thread up, it's come loose. So here's my basket of goodies for this magical mystery tour. So I've got, to start with, I've got 2 squares for my backgrounds of woolly blanket. Now you want something with a bit of substance. You could do it just on some cotton sheet, but it will make a later stage more problematic. So if you've got some woolly blanket or some felt or some low loft wadding or batting, by low loft I mean the stuff that's not really fluffy and puffy, you know, the flat, more felty like stuff that's a bit more stable, something like that. Or if you've got some very thick old flannel, something of that kind, that would be ideal. If you haven't and you want to go along, then just get a piece of cotton sheet. So you want that, like I said, my finished size has to be 8 inches, so I've cut these 10 inches, so I don't have to work right to the edge, it's just handier. And then I've got some wiggle room, you know, because I have to have them a specific size. But like I said in my introductory spiel, you could do a different size if you didn't want to do, this is quite big, if you wanted to do a 6 inch, then that would make a lovely rice bag. Or you can, you know, you can see. You can wait till part 2 and then you can see. So I've got 2 of those because I need to make 2. Now you do need to make 2. You can't just make 1. You need 1 of each, okay? At least 2 or 4 or, you know, whatever, multiples of 2. So then I've got in my little basket here some scraps. Now I've got some light scraps and some dark scraps. So that's my theme, light and dark. You could also choose 2 complementary colours if you're not into the monochrome. You know, you could do, I don't know, red and orange, or no, not red and orange because they're not complementary, Catherine, don't be silly. Red and green, or, you know, blue and orange, something like that. That would also work. But you need 2 colour palettes or tonal palettes with contrast between them. Okay? So I've just gone through my scraps and I've just pulled out here, I've got sort of neutralish, mostly eco print, grungy tea-dyed stuff. I've got a little bit of my daddy's pyjamas because I can take some of the lighter area out of that to include if I want to. And then on the other side I didn't have a lot of darks, so I've got what I could find. I have got, however, some quite dark purples, and that's probably dark enough as it is. This isn't very dark, but I've got this bit of black chiffon, and I thought I could, if I use some of this purple, then lay the chiffon over it, and it'll just give a really nice, you know, it'll darken it up. So you can do that as well if you've got something thin, just layer it over to get the effect, whether it's dark or light or changing the colour slightly or whatever. It's just, you know, layering. Don't be afraid to layer. So I've got that and that. So I think what I'll do, because this is going to be, as all these slow stitchy things often are, quite a lengthy process, I'm going to do exactly the same thing to both my squares, only I'm going to do one with my darks and one with my lights. So I think I'll show you what I'm going to do with the one, or partly explain and partly do, and then go away and do some homework. I'm filming this actually on Thursday because I knew I'd need the time. So then I can sit this afternoon, watch the tennis from Eastbourne, where they are playing music at end change, but it's not as intrusive as it was at Queen's, for those of you who are interested in keeping up on my tennis rants. And then I can come back again later in the day or first thing tomorrow morning and you know, sort of wrap up this part 1. So I hope that's alright. So let's get going. So shall I do lights? I think I'll do darks with you because I think that might be easier for you to see what I'm doing. I don't know. Let's do darks. So I'll put that out of shot because you don't really need to see it. And I'll get one of my bits of woolly blanket. And the only other things you'll need at this stage are some pins, and I've got my little clover applique pins, and some basting thread. Now I'm going to use the good old invisible baste, which I learned from Jude Hill, to baste everything down. You could, if you don't like doing invisible baste, just do normal baste, but the advantage of invisible baste is you don't have to take it out and it doesn't get in the way of your fancy stitching, because there's going to be a lot of surface stitching. So if you're going along with me, just a heads up as they say, there will be a lot of surface stitching. It won't be fancy in terms of elaborate, but there'll be a lot of it, okay? Hopefully mostly using the aughts, the little odds and ends. Right, anyway, Catherine, you're getting ahead of yourself. So I've got my background. I'm basically going to do collage. So I'm going to show you a bit because maybe some of you are new here. I've had quite a lot of new people lately, so welcome, welcome if you're one of them. Thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to have you here. I've done cloth collage with you on and off over the time that I've been doing these videos. The first time I did it with you, I think, was way back when I did the stitch meditation scroll and also the cloth pouch. But I'll do it, a little bit of it, just, you know, for those of you who are new or those who want a refresher or whatever. So I've got my dark scraps, and I'm just going to grab one almost at random. She said choosing carefully. And these are all different kinds. Some are cotton, I think that's polyester, and I don't mind using polyester if it's, you know, vintage, repurposed, whatever. I wouldn't buy new. But I always do this. It's just a little needle test. Is it nice to stitch? I don't really want to be doing lots of heavy stitching if it's not nice. And I might even put it onto my background because sometimes a combination of the two is not nice. And that's fine and nice and soft, so I'm happy to use that. So let's start with that bit since it's there, but it's quite big. It's actually darker on this side. So I think I'm going to cut it, dear Henry. Oh, not with the... It's the other thing, I don't like cutting polyester with the... These are my sharp scissors, Sharpies, snippies, and these are the blunties, because it blunts your sharp scissors. So I'll try and keep my wits. Maybe I'll just use the blunties and put the Sharpies away. That's maybe the best plan. So I'm going to start, like I said, because I've cut this 2 inches bigger than I need, I'm going to just start a little bit in from the margin, from the edge, leave a little margin. And just put a pin in it just to hold it there. And I love doing cloth collage. I just find it so relaxing. I'm going to get this bit of, this was an offcut from the Moon project. I might go somewhere else. It's interesting as well to observe yourself in a process like this, whether you're someone who starts, you know, like this and works that way, or whether you could also just put bits all over and then fill in the gaps, or do you start in the middle and work out? I'm inclined when I'm doing collage, whether it's cloth or paper, to start around the edges and work my way in. I think I will put that there, and I'm going to tuck that under. And you want to overlap by somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 of an inch. There's no real hard and fast rule. Kind of depends a bit on the cloth as well. We're back to listening to the cloth, which is something I've said before. So if you've got a very firm, stable, you know, cotton or something that's quite newish, you don't need to overlap that much. But if you have something flimsy and older and fragile, then you might need to overlap by a bit more. I hope that makes sense. Got this lovely bit of dark blue silk. Now that's a bit big. I'm going to cut some off. I try and kind of vary the shapes and the widths and things just for visual interest, but to be honest, that's very much process really. I suppose it's partly visible at the end. By the time I've put all the aforementioned stitching over, you're probably not really going to see that the pieces are different shapes and sizes. So this, I like that fluffy edge of this silk, so I want that on top. That's another thing that informs whether I tuck under or put on top. And I don't really like either, or I don't find it visually pleasing to have edges lined up like that. You might be different, but just pay attention to things like that. So I like to kind of stagger them. That, because it's fraying there, is going to be overlapped by 1/2 inch, just for the reasons I mentioned before. Right, that fly is still in here. I've also got in here some of this lovely black velvet, which makes me straight away think of that song, which I won't sing to you. I think it's cotton velvet. It came out of my friend Chrissy's scraps. And it's quite frayy, and all these little black crumbs come off it, but let's go for it anyway. Let's put it there. You can always move them, you know, that's why they're pinned. That's a bit, see, that's a bit central. So maybe I won't put it there. Also, this is quite thick and this is quite thick, so I wouldn't overlap those two. I want this to be overlapping with thinner bits. So, you know, there's all kinds of things to think about. Let's put it down there. I've got an odd shape here that I need to fill in later. Let's just put it down there for now. And having a little dig. I've got this other very dark purple. I do like the idea of, you know, although it's mostly black, I've got this is very dark blue. This black's got a bit of white in it, but very muted. And that again is, I don't want a great big chunk. Let's have a more squarish piece. We haven't had one of those yet. I always prefer to tear if I can. And they've been, all these have been pulled out of my scrap basket, so of course they've got bits all over. And I was a bit sneezy. It's dusty, isn't it? It's dusty rooting through your scraps. It can be. And we'll put that one in this corner and move that down slightly, so that overlaps there like that. And then I think I'll move this up slightly so that there's a bigger gap there, rather than leaving a little skinny gap. Although you can put skinny bits, there's no harm in that. Right, so once you've got a few pieces down, I find that it gives you something to work with. I guess it's like that fear of the blank page thing that you know, you have when you do mixed media work or painting or sketching or that kind of thing. This is quite shiny. It's polyester. It was a sample. I had a whole colour load of them. I wonder with that over. See there again, that's going to be those three, so I'm going to audition. It's so important to me that it's nice to stitch. I see, I don't like the feel of that, so I'm going to put that to one side and not use that in this. Some of this, some odd shapes. I've got this, it's spray time. It's a very classic range of new fabric. These are scraps from my friend Rosie, I believe. There we go, I knew it had some triangle-y bits. I quite like having odd different shapes as well, rather than all squares and rectangles. So I wonder if I can make this fill that gap. Like so, somehow. There's going to be a weird little place there I need to come right over. Just playing, really. It's just playing, but it's just, you know, there's all those little things to bear in mind. I think I'll tuck that under. There we go. I've got this, which also I can tell it's got polyester in it. So again, it gets a needle through it. And I needle it as if I'm taking a stitch. That's quite important, not to just, you know, go like that. I wouldn't take a stitch that big in this, because it might do that okay, but then if you come to do a normal size stitch, whatever that is for you, it might not be. You can even just take a few stitches. And I use in general the needle that I'm going to stitch with. This is a tulip. I think it's actually a tulip number 8, that one, but it's close enough. My number 9s have got thread in. There's 2 number 9s in there, but they're both threaded, I think. So that, I'm not 100% happy with it, but it's such a nice matte black. You see how that and that, they're both black, but because this is velvet and this is cotton, they've got a completely different look to them. This is also black cotton, but it's from a thrifted shirt that I think was Easy Iron or something like that. So although it's 100% cotton, it's treated. But you see, you know that this, don't you? No two blacks are the same. So just using black with I've got my purple and my blue, but you can get quite a nice effect. Same with any colour, really. I mean, black is no colours, is it? Black is an absence of colour. But you can have the same colour, but just by varying the tones and the hues and all those other colour words, you can get some nice effects. Sorry, when I start concentrating I stop talking, which might be a relief for some of you. Just put that like that, quite like that. There's quite a lot of it underneath there. Actually, I'm going to pull this up and pull this up so there's less underneath there. And now I'll put my pin strategically here so it holds both of those pieces down. And I can do the same here, because I've got a limited number of pins, and I do love to use my little plique pins for this, because when I pick it up to baste it, they don't bite you. Maybe I'll put that right up there like that, so that's becoming that edge, and then I need something for that little corner. It's got a nice sound, that silk, as well. I've got this bit of eco print, silk noil. Very dark eco print, that's lots of tannin and iron in the bundle. If you're new here and you don't know what I'm talking about, I've got a whole playlist about eco printing if you go to my main page. I will do more of it in the autumn, I expect, when the leaves are best, or the late summer. As the tannins rise in the leaves, you get better results. In general, there's, some, as always, exceptions, but that's a general. So I think you get the idea. I think that's been quite just checking a little while. So I'll go on and finish my pinning of pieces, and when I've done that I'll come back and show you the next stage, okay? Okay, there's my collage all pinned. I did move some things, that happens, that's normal. I did some of the chiffon overlay that I talked about here over the purple. I left this dark purple because it's very dark, and I left the blue, and I don't mind that some of the little bits of purple are poking out. You have to pay attention to your unders and your overs, and make little decisions and change things. And here and there I have, like here I've got a line, but I liked this that it curved, so that's why I had those in line. I've overlaid here, there's a very thin piece of the black cotton underneath, and then there's that triangle of purple silk is just laid over the top. There's a tiny bit of white poking out there, and that is the edge of this where it was torn. But I'm not worried about little things like that. The stitching's going to sort that out, and if it doesn't, you can always just put another piece of cloth over the top. So now I need to baste it, and I'm going to use the invisible base like I said. Now you've got kind of two options really. You could just do lines through everything and not really worry about edges and go, 2 or 3 inches apart, parallel lines. I prefer to do a really good job of it because I like to get all the pins out and know it's all secure. So I just kind of plan a route and pretty much baste around the edge of everything. And in some cases, like I can do this line all in one go and you get what's underneath as well. Because I enjoy the process anyway, but you obviously have to do you. But I like to get everything basted, and a larger piece like this I will do sitting at my desk or sitting at a table. And then once it's all basted, then I know I can take it over onto my lap and start my fancy stitching. So I'll just show you a little bit of the invisible baste, and then I'll go away and do it because that's going to take me another considerable amount of time. I've got normal sewing cotton, this is some grey vintage stuff I've been using up, and I put a knot in the end, and I'm going to come through from the back and I'm going to it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to come in about 1/4 of an inch from the edge, I guess. This is purely to hold everything down so you can get the pins out, and then you take a tiny back stitch on the front of the cloth, and then you come forward by however much you want, 1/2 an inch, 3/4 of an inch, whatever. And you don't see it on the front, and you don't have to take it out. You see tiny little dimples sometimes, but it's just genius. One of the many wonderful things I've learned from the fabulous Jude Hill. So I might just go all the way along this one edge to start with, or I might decide when I come to the edge of a patch. I could have turned and gone down there if I'd thought of it and not been talking to you. But I might, when I come here, I might turn, and I'll just leave the pins in until I'm sure that that patch isn't going to go anywhere. So I might turn that and just come along the edge of this patch. Because you can always, if you find yourself stitched up a blind alley kind of thing, you can just invisible baste across something that doesn't really need it to get you to the next place where you need to be. You know, you don't have to keep ending your thread off. I'll come up here and do this one, and then if you come to little areas, especially if you've pulled your cloth out of the scraps like I have and not ironed it and it's all rumply, just push it into place with your thumb, and then make sure you get a stitch into that little area that wants to rumple up, and hold it down. And when you feel a pin's redundant, did I say that, you can just take it out and just keep going. I call it, up in my head to myself, Operation Get the Pins Out. If you have little loose bits or bits of fraying that you're not happy with, it's best really, like here, I'm not sure if I'm going to leave this or not, but it's best to leave it until you've done your basting, because then it's secure and you can gently pull at it and trim bits and do all that. I do that once I've basted. So I'll turn it and I'll come up here. And now because I've stitched there, that pin's redundant. And then you have to kind of decide which direction. Well, I think I might go back and do the edge of this because this wasn't done. So I'll come up to there. I just love this process. I like all the stages of the process, but just getting everything kind of stitched down, all cohesive. The surface straight away all becomes one. And then you just prepared yourself a lovely background to go and do your fancy stitching on. So that is the process. So I'll go and do all this. That will take me quite some time. See here, I'm just checking, have I tacked that already? Because I need to go back in that way, because I've done here. So I'm just checking, was that tacked down already? Yes, but I don't think this wasn't here. So I can just work my way in there. Whoops, sorry. Tack that bit of velvet down. So that's what I mean by just, you know, exploring as you go and seeing what needs to be done. Whoops, don't stab yourself in the thumb. Okay, so I'll go and finish all my invisible basting and then I'll be back again. Okay, I'm all basted, and I hope you can see, if you haven't done this before, that now it's almost as if it's one cloth. So I'll show you the back. You can't really see because I've stitched into the blanket and not right through here and there. But I've gone around the edge of every patch pretty much with that little invisible basting stitch. So now the next thing to do is to do what I call the fancy stitching. So I've gone through my tangly nest of orts, which are just odds and ends of nearly all 6-stranded embroidery floss, and I've pulled out everything dark. Now I don't have a lot of black. In fact, I think I could only find one bit of actual black. If you don't have this, don't worry. You could either just choose a few skeins of floss and, you know, work from a few skeins, or even you could just choose one colour, like for this black maybe, and just work with that whole colour throughout. That's also absolutely fine. But I like to have the variety and use these. So I've pulled out, I'll just talk through a little bit of what I've got. So I've got navy blue, I've got black. If you're not sure, just lay them on there. Like, I wondered if this grey was a bit light, but when I lay it on there, no, I think it will blend, because I'm not going to do concentrated areas of each colour. I'm going to do them all over, if that makes sense. So I've even got some green in there, some of this tealy blue, some very dark brown, some dark red. Do you get the idea? So it's just all darks. And what I'm going to do now, I've got my needle threaded up ready to go. I'm going to use 2 strands everywhere. If you wanted to use a pearl cotton you could, or whatever you use, just use what you got. But I'm going to use this. I'm just going to stitch parallel lines of running stitch. I did warn you at the beginning it was going to be a lot of stitching. Where they fall, which is a bit different for everyone, but you want them quite close together. Mine usually end up just under 1/4 of an inch apart. So lines all the way this way, 1/4 of an inch apart, and I told you it was a lot of stitching, and lines this way, 1/4, so in both directions. And you don't need to worry too much about your lines going wonky. I certainly wouldn't recommend drawing them on or anything, but what you can do as a guide is just look at the edges of your patches where they're straight and follow those. And you can, if you absolutely want to start at one end and work your way along, you can, mixing your colours as you go, and then turn it and do the other way. I prefer to work a bit more haphazard. So what I'll do is I'll just pick somewhere, like I see a line here, so maybe I'll start there. So I'll come through from the back, and then I'll do my running stitches. And again, you don't have to go right through if you've got thick wadding or whatever. And just let your stitch length be. You don't want great huge stitches, but certainly don't worry about getting them even or anything like that. I hope you can see, because I have to bunch it up in my hand. So I'm just going to stitch, and I'm kind of just got my eye on that line, but it really doesn't matter if you go wonky. I'm not just saying it because I don't mind it. It's not going to notice in the grand scheme of things with the finished piece. So I'm stitching faster than I normally would, just so you don't have to sit there for hours getting bored. And what I will do is I'll just stitch on with my one length of thread. So I'll stitch right across to the other side. And then when I get to the other side, I'll turn, move over, somewhere in the region of 1/4 of an inch, slightly less. And then I'll come back the other way, and I'll keep doing that until this thread runs out, and then I'll change to a different colour and use that until that runs out, and so on. It's pretty similar, only we're working on a square, to the kind of stitching that I do on my Stitch Meditation scrolls. Now I don't have a line to follow anymore, but it's only a short run. And have I mentioned that it doesn't really matter? Oops. So once I get to the edge, I shall turn it and come back up about 1/4 of an inch away. Now and this is just a thing, I like to stagger my stitches. That for me is process as much as the look of it. But again, it really doesn't matter. Just let your stitches go where they go. It's very unlikely, unless you make a conscious effort, that you'll get them all lined up, in exactly the same place. But for me, for the process, it's just something I do, a little quirk. I like the stitches to not be parallel to each other, if that makes sense. I like them to be staggered. I'm holding it a bit awkward, but I hope you can see what I'm doing with all this dark cloth. So I'm not worrying about the edges, because I know I'm going to stitch back the other way when I'm done. So that's basically all I'm going to do. So I'm going to carry on doing that. Like I said, I'm going to keep changing colour. I might also at some point change direction. Sometimes I do that. If my thread runs out somewhere in the middle, I might turn and start stitching purpledicular. Got it in there. Sorry, it's a very old joke. Wasn't even a joke, but some of you think it's funny, including me. So, you know, I might at one point start going this way and then go that way, but aiming to end up with every square millimetre of the cloth, not every square millimetre, you know what I mean, every bit of cloth covered with stitching lines that way and stitching lines that way. So that is going to take me some time to do. So I'm going to have some lunch first because it's 20 to 2 and I'm getting a bit hungry. And then I'm going to go and sit and stitch all that, probably today and this evening, and I'm going to come back in the morning and show you what I've done and give you your homework if you want to, or this is your homework. Do this basically as your homework. Anyway, I need to eat. I'll go eat and then I'll be back. Okay, I haven't quite done my homework, but I've done enough to show you, I think, because it is, did I mention, a lot of stitching. Just get my needle out so I don't poke myself. So I've done, I'll angle it, I've done, like I said, parallel lines of stitching around 1/4 inch apart, going in both directions. And in this direction, in the vertical direction from me, I'm up to here, so I've got this much left to do. And like I mentioned, I'm inclined to go one way and then go the other. You could absolutely go all one way and all the other, but I just like to, I don't know why, it's just the process. And then going this way, I'm up to here. So I've got to finish a few more lines this way and then just under half this way, and that will all be done. And it makes a really firm, stable, textured surface. And because I've got the woolly blanket, you see all the lovely little bumps and ripples. So that's what you're aiming for one of your pieces. And then the other piece, like I said at the beginning, needs to be a contrast. Now all I've done is collaged and basted. I haven't started the fancy stitching on this yet, but you see the high contrast between the two pieces, I hope. And I've just pulled out of my Orts Ready lots of light coloured threads, so I've even got a very pale blue there and a very pale yellow, but they're mostly whites and creams, to do that same kind of stitching on this piece. So I hope that's clear enough. Oh, by the way, I said I didn't have any black thread. Found some. It's not floss, but I had this. Got it in France somewhere on a brocante, I think. It's Coton Reprise's mending cotton. Look, whole box of black, and it's a bit finer than embroidery floss. It's 4-stranded, so I've been using 3 strands of it. So anyway, I found I'm all right for black thread for a while. Just found it in my cheese box room. Was it Laura that said call it the cheese box room? Because most people call their little room the box room. And mine's got cheese boxes in. Anyway, it's the cheese box room. That's where I found that. Okay, so that's it then. That's the beginning stage of our little mystery slow stitch along. If you plan to, or if you're inspired to follow me, you know, from now, not knowing where we're going, or you could wait. In 2 weeks' time will be part 2, probably the second and final part. I think it's enough, you know. I think we can do it in 2 parts. So that will be Friday in 2 weeks, because next Friday is Park Home Life. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it, whether you plan to do it or not, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more Cloth Tales. Lots of love and kisses. Bye bye. Oh, no rings on either. Sorry about that. Continuity's all over the place in this video. Bye bye.